Welcome to the second day of the challenge of how to interpret horse behaviour. This is for the people that have put their hands up for the challenge in my Facebook group, Calm, Willing, Confident Horses. So all the people participating have enrolled in my course, Things to Know About Horses. And this is the case study story that goes with chapter 2. And we're looking at traits of horse behaviour. So the objectives of this case study is to analyse horse behaviour case and form potential theories for behavioural changes. So just a bit of background. So this is all about a horse called HD. Now HD we will label as the anxious off-the-track thoroughbred. He was retired from racing 2 years prior, and he was owned by Phoebe, who was a school teacher. She was in her late 30s and had recently got back into horse riding after riding horses as a child. She was supported in riding by her good friend, that was an accomplished endurance rider who had found HD for her and had put a number of months into him before handing him over to Phoebe. So Phoebe had started to struggle with HD. He would get anxious under saddle, especially if she tried to ride him away from the adjustment property. And she also had difficulty just handling him in general and especially floating him. She came to me requesting help for his anxiety. She kept HD at an adjustment centre where he was kept in a small individual yard and he was put in a stable at night. He was fed a hard feed and supplements and hay twice a day. So the following photo is of HD and his condition the day I met him. I'm not going to say too much exactly about what I thought I saw. I'm just going to tell you what I did, okay, because I'll leave that up for you to examine and have some ideas on. So he did appear sound, so he was able to walk, trot and canter. He didn't have any obvious unsoundness or lameness. And when I palpated him over his body, he did show some minor reactions around his wither, his back, especially his lower back, and the girth area. It was not majorly significant, but it was enough for me to recommend that he visit a vet, bodywork, saddle fit check, and also recommended nutritionist, because this is my approach to training, which is holistic, looking at the whole horse. So Phoebe only had enough funds for a visit to the vet, and the vet examined HD and prescribed ulcer treatment and also some changes to his shearing regime. So this is the photo of HD the first day that I saw him. So I'm not going to necessarily comment. I'm going to leave that up to you guys just to examine. So he was a very big horse. He stood at about 16.3 and he'd raced for a number of years and had been, semi-successful on and off. Okay, so in regards to training, I commenced Phoebe in my groundwork program. This put Phoebe in control of resetting his foundation training responses. Now, Phoebe didn't have access to a round yard, therefore groundwork training with a halter, lead and training stick was commenced. So Phoebe attended weekly coaching sessions with me that are 45-minute duration. And what would happen is what I typically do is I work with the horse first and I click through all my exercises from the first one and all the ones that lead on from that. And then what I do is I hand the lead rope over to the client. In this case, it was Phoebe, and they take over and I coach them in the actual training practice and approach, and coach them as they work their horse. Now, I found HD responded really well to training. He was very easy to focus. He learnt quickly and he became calm and settled in his work quite fast. Now with Phoebe really struggled with coordinating the training tools, the rope and the training stick, and moving her body. She really struggled with that, which lots of people do. So she really struggled with timing and she'd easily become very flustered, and getting flustered and anxious was actually made worse because HD had a very unusual response to her. So HD would go from being calm and focused with me And as soon as I handed the lead rope over to Phoebe, he would instantly, it's like his blood pressure went up, he'd become distracted. So he was just really triggered by Phoebe being in control of him. So this continued for 3 weeks with only minor improvements in Phoebe's ability to coordinate the training tools and body movement. It was mainly because also Phoebe just didn't have a lot of time she wasn't able to practice. She was basically only working HD with me at my place. And during these 3 sessions, HD would continue. He'd work very well with me and he would become anxious with Phoebe. So she was very limited of her time working with HG at that time. So on week 4, Phoebe and HD arrived for their session. Once again, Phoebe had not worked HD during the week, but she'd found him less anxious to handle. She explained that earlier in the week she'd moved HD from his original adjustment facility to her friend's property, so the endurance rider that had found HD for her. So instead of being in a yard, he was actually put out in a big paddock pasture with other horses. And Phoebe felt a bit bad about him not having a stable at night, but she thought he looked happier in his new paddock and he'd made friends with her friend's endurance horses. So, she said that he seemed happier, and the last couple of days she'd been handling him, he was actually a little better to handle. So during this fourth session, HD, as previously, had worked very well for me. So he worked really well for me. But this time, instead of when I handed the lead rope over to Phoebe, when his blood pressure would come up and he'd get anxious, he actually remained pretty calm when Phoebe took over and started working with him. So instead of becoming anxious and distracted, he actually paid her more attention. Phoebe was still struggling with her coordination. She'd made some improvement though, but this session was really good for her because she, without HD's anxiety on the other end of the lead rope, with him being more calm, she was able to make big inroads that particular session. And, it was a really interesting session because HD appeared more tolerant of her because, he was very good with me. I was very clear. But because Phoebe was uncoordinated and made her a little inconsistent and a little more grey with her communication. But, this particular session, HD appeared to tolerate that better, or at least not get us upset by it. So Phoebe and HD continued their steady improvement from this 4th training session. So Phoebe was able to practice at home more with him, and over the following 6-month period, they eventually completed all the groundwork and all the foundation training with HD and completely reset all his training responses. And they actually ended up doing really well. And they then went on to enjoy many trail riding adventures and endurance ride, which is what Phoebe wanted to do with HD, and they became a good team. So after listening to this case, I'd like you to propose some potential reasons as to why HD improved in his response to training with Phoebe and his anxiety appeared to improve. So have a bit of a brainstorm about that. Okay, good luck. Looking forward to your responses.